Podcasters Roundtable round 140. Where are all the subscribers? That's today's clickbait link. My gosh, what's wrong with me? I'm getting links and titles and everything confused. Oh, we're off to a good start. And I've only had one sip of my BYO beverage, but we'll get there. All right, welcome back. Do you have subscribe buttons on your website? Do you even have a website? Which ones do you have? Which ones should you have? We're going to get into that and some other stories. But let's meet the roundtable. And Susie, new roundtabler, welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you all. I knew some of you. Well, I know all of you because I watch you online. It's so strange to actually see you for real, or know that you can hear me. That's the strange thing.
She's usually yelling at the podcast when we can't hear her. Now she gets to yell at us in person.
Yeah, exactly.
Hold us accountable.
So I'm Susie Buttress, and I'm the host of the Casual Birder podcast, which is a bird watching podcast.
Very cool. And you said you just had Evo Terra, who's a fill-in co-host for us. And I was joking that I think, first of all, I didn't know he was a bird watcher. Second of all, I think it's a long play just to get on your podcast so he can promote his own.
Yeah, he traveled the world to see birds so that he could be on my show.
That sounds exactly like
That's
Evo.
all. That's Evo, head to toe.
Hey, speaking of subscribers, if this is your first time, because I think there's a lot of new people that do get exposed to the show either through YouTube or Dave or Daniel. It's might be your first time watching or listening. Hit the subscribe, whether that's podcast audio only or YouTube, because I was just thinking the other day, like, how many shows are there that you are a subscriber, and then almost every subscriber has a chance to be on that show. Like, I don't subscribe to a show that then I'm going to end up on. That is the opportunity here. We want to see everyone who subscribes eventually be on Podcasters Roundtable as a guest. And our second new roundtabler, Andy's been on that list for quite a while. So I'm super excited to get him in. Andy, welcome.
Hit that bell. Yeah, thank you for having me.
What's
Very
your podcast?
excited to be here. Andy Wong from the Inspired Money podcast. I like your clickbait today, but I think if you truly had clickbait, you would have had virus in that title.
Yeah, that's my other job. I do a lot of podcasts with that in the title, so I've got all the clickbait going on.
But it's great to be here, and I have met Daniel in person. I've met Dave in person. Ray and Susie, I have not met in person, but I feel as if I know you already.
I don't know how you've been at Podcast Movement. I feel like I might have passed you at one of the conferences, but maybe not.
Possibly, maybe in Philadelphia.
And maybe, maybe we'll. I wasn't in Philly. I think we're going to talk about something that actually fits right into that with going to conferences, but not always being able to go to conferences. How do you meet those people that you'd want to meet at a conference? So we're going to get into that sort of networking with your peers online, not always in person. And I think Andy and Susie they knew of each other before they even came on this round. It was not planned. So that is very cool. Small world we have in the roundtable. It's a small roundtable. We're all squeezed around real tight.
Well, if I can say, I'm not a bird watcher, but I've listened to Susie's show, and the passion and enthusiasm that she brings makes me interested. I've listened to her show, even though I'm not a bird watcher.
Nice.
Oh,
that is podcast.
You.
That's awesome. That is podcast. I have done the same, listened to shows that I would never normally subscribe to and been taken away because good storytellers like Susie just leads the conversation. That's fantastic. So podcastersroundtable.com/guest if you want to sign up. You'll also get the subscribe buttons there. Which ones? I don't even know. There's not enough. I'll tell you that. But we'll tell you. We'll also tell you how to get the right ones, which ones they should be. I think Daniel's going to point us to that. But Daniel, co-host, welcome.
Thank you from the audacitytopodcast.com and several other things. And fresh with garlic breath.
Oh, good thing this isn't a scratch and sniff episode. Wow.
All of our ASMR listeners just were like, oh boy, best episode ever.
Or the other way, but yeah, sure. Smell coming. 4D podcast coming to your phone. Yeah, you know what? I'm not that someday our phones are gonna miss the scent. Anyways, I'm moving.
It's all about VR.
Yeah, VR. We're living it. Dave Jackson, co-host, welcome back.
Yeah, glad to be back. Since we're all swapping bird stories, my grandma had records, like actual vinyl records of birds. And I think my favorite track was Bob White I remember right. It was if there's a bird called Bob White or something. I remember I always just wanted to grab it and wicka wicka Bob White. I'm like, yeah, it's my favorite. So
Did you just scratch a record
of bird calls? Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because here's the thing, people, in a little behind the scenes, I asked Dave on Slack in our Roundtable Slack channel, could he be on the 1s and 2s for screenshots? And he just had zero
Nothing.
idea. Even when I went the 1s and 2s, it just didn't happen. So I had to explain to him, and then you just went and scratched a I'm just
I
so
did.
dude, 2 points you lost there.
That's it.
Herbie
Yeah.
Hancock action.
That's Herbie Hancock. Thank you. All right. Breakdancing. Cool. Let's get into it. Let's lead off. I like Daniel. I'm squeezing in a promo like between every little introduction here. So Podcasters Roundtable YouTube channel, youtube.com/Podcasters Roundtable. But Daniel's going to lead us into our first story so that it's not completely clickbait. We are going to lead off with this sort of idea of the subscribers. Where are the subscribers? Where are they coming from? What buttons are they pressing? So Daniel, what is this story? What app buttons should you have on your podcast website?
Yeah, James Cridland from podnews.net has been studying how the clicks have been performing on all of the buttons on his site. Now, what's really neat with podnews.net is that he has a podcast catalog there. So you can find your podcast on podnews.net and see a bunch of buttons, and he makes these buttons show up dynamically. So like Google Podcasts, for example, won't show up on an iPhone, or Apple Podcasts won't show up on an Android, but he does display a lot of buttons, and he's been tracking the clicks on all of those buttons and put out this report on February 25th with some surprising results that showed that of the buttons, Google Podcasts was clicked the most, then Apple Podcasts, then the RSS feed, and then Spotify. And then everyone else was significantly under that.
Did you say Google Wait, what was the number one?
Number one was Google Podcasts. Now,
yeah, I think there's
I
a reason.
suspect there's a reason for that. And he even puts this out in his article, acknowledging that that could be skewed data. Because one of the things that James is known for is being a proponent of Google Podcasts, and also telling podcasters, find your podcast on my website so you can get your Google Podcast link. So I think a lot of podcasters have been going to a site, clicking on the Google Podcast link just to see that it works. So I think that's slightly skewed data. However, it does closely align with data that I have other than the spike with Google Podcasts. But very interesting to see RSS so popular among his visitors.
So I'm showing the screenshot there. If you're not seeing this, also a great reason to watch the video, youtube.com/Podcasters Roundtable. And go ahead, Dave.
I find it odd that Luminary and Overcast have the same amount of clicks.
Well, when we're talking same amount, you got to say the percentages.
Well, yeah, 1.3%.
Yeah.
And I was just like, really? Castbox says 3.7. Well, and why is Overcast? There's Overcast and Overcast Web. I just saw that.
Yeah, what he does, he
Web.
explains it more in the article.
Yeah.
The Overcast Web displays to, I think, desktop or computer users, and the Overcast app does not. Something like that. So there is some dynamic display of one icon or another.
So Daniel, you have a service that would allow us to pick all of these and put them
Yeah.
on our website if we wanted to, right? But what is the general advice? Well, let me ask Andy, do you have podcast subscribe buttons on your website?
I have 3, and I think like many podcasters at the start, I had a ton. I probably had nearly all of them there, thinking that gave me some sort of legitimacy, so that when a visitor came in, they're like, wow, this is available at all these places. But I have since simplified to just Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify.
And for the reason of less confusion, or that's where you just think people want to get your podcast?
For me, it was the idea is simplicity. I started thinking about if my dad visited the webpage, he's going to get confused by too many icons. And if I could reduce it to 3, I actually had reduced it to 2, to Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And then the rationale being that on any other place, if someone is going to be listening elsewhere, they should be technologically able to find it in another app or another platform. But I think it was Rob Walsh who recommended to me that Spotify is worth including in there. So I did.
Cool. How about Susie? Do you have some of these on there?
Well, I don't have the actual buttons. I just have the links through. So I've got highlighted text. And the main reason for that is that I'm still learning how to put my website together. And although I know there was some code that allowed you to put the buttons in, I wasn't quite sure how to do it. And I didn't want to do anything that meant that the button that or the image that I used somehow got corrupted and then wasn't the proper brand. So I've been a bit wary of doing it. I wasn't quite sure how to do it. So seeing that article made me think I really need to, because a lot of my I do have quite a lot of Spotify listens, and it might encourage more people to listen via Spotify. But I think I would go for the 4, as you mentioned, the Google Podcast, the Apple, Spotify, and whatever the last one was, which I forgot. Oh, the RSS feed. But I already have a player on that same page, the sort of first page go to.
So let's address that. Daniel, you said, I think one of your takeaways was the surprising number for RSS feeds, right? Being clicked.
Yeah, both in what James is reporting and also in my own data, like on James's site. So if we just take out Google Podcasts from this, Google Podcasts to him was 29.3%, Apple Podcasts 17.3%, RSS feed 15.1%, and Spotify 9%. So the RSS feed was being clicked almost as many times as Apple Podcasts. Now, on my own site, I see a significantly different switch. So on my site, which I'm showing the page now if you're watching the video, but I'll describe this. Here are the buttons, the icons that I display on my site through my own plugin that I sell. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, RSS, Podcast RSS, which is the podcast only RSS feed, so no articles in that. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Android using subscribeonandroid.com. The results for these have been really interesting. Looking at my data from January, I'll customize this report. I'll look at the data for 90 days or more, going back to December 1st. This won't be 90 days. It'll be more like whatever. Yeah, close to 90 days. December 1st, 2019 through February 27th, 2020, it is amazingly skewed toward still the RSS feed. I have the most popular on here is the site-wide RSS feed, which uses the standard RSS icon. It has the most at 4,049 unique clicks. And then the second highest would be Apple Podcasts for 2,248 clicks. Then the podcast only RSS feed, 2,163 clicks. YouTube, 1,167 clicks. Spotify, 934 clicks. Facebook, 955. Subscribe on Android, 907. Google Podcasts, 581. And then Twitter, 434. So the RSS, either my site-wide RSS or the podcast RSS feed, account for more clicks, I think, combined than anything else, maybe.
And I think, too, I wonder if, we never know what's really driving the numbers. I mean, in this case, I wonder if a lot of people who don't find your show on Apple come to the website, right? So it kind of like filters out, because the numbers are still overwhelmingly skewed in Apple's as far as consumption goes, right? So most subscribers for most podcasts are going to come from Apple. Also makes me think that, because it seems like a lot of people know how to find a podcast on Apple. So those people are sort of taken care of. And that most people who end up your website, either they came there in order to subscribe to Apple, or they came there because they're like, where else do I get this podcast? I don't have Apple device, right?
Right. And
And
my
so-
audience being an audience of podcasters, of
Right.
course, the data is going to be a little bit different than maybe most other podcasts might find, but still seeing the RSS so popular. And these links, by the way, in case you're thinking this is tracking just RSS visits from anything, these links specifically, the site feed and the RSS, the podcast feed, are linked only from my front page of the audacitytopodcast.com. I don't use those links anywhere else.
Another super important one that I'm not seeing people use, or that I don't even see pop in these conversations, which I think everyone should have, especially Andy talks about his dad. Make sure people can subscribe to your podcast by email. Like that is huge. Okay. Like really huge. Not to mention you then have a mailing list. Right?
Yeah.
So whatever service you have, you can create that. Even FeedBurner used to do that in FeedBurner, but I would say include that. I always try to make sure, along with RSS, so we can see the importance of that. Email people, if they don't understand anything, they're like, oh, I can get this delivered in my inbox, and it's surprisingly popular. So anyways, I think that's a good one to add. Dave, what's your general recommendation when you're telling new podcasters with like having subscribe buttons and all that
Yeah,
stuff?
I say at a minimum, Apple, Google, and Spotify. Those are the top three, and then anything after that is your call.
And it
Like
changes.
I have like everything on there because I was playing with Daniel's plugin and was like, oh, I'll just do this, and I'm like, oh, I need to go back and change that later, and then never did. So that's why there's 8 billion. Not that it's hard to change, I just never got around to it. But yeah, and so the thing that really surprised me about this is on a weekly basis, if not multiple times a week, I get the question, I clicked on the RSS feed, I think it's broken, I got a face full of code. And then you have to explain, nope, that's what happens, especially if you're in Chrome. And then you have to, like, back in the day, kids, you know, copy that link and paste it into iTunes, and that's how you subscribe to a podcast. And they're like, what? So that's the part. I don't know. The chat room is saying maybe it's because James's audience is a little more geeky. Maybe that's why the RSS feed. But I don't know, Daniel. Do you think your audience is also fairly geeky?
I realized my RSS tracking here, counting, is flawed because there's the potential that what people are doing is they're right-clicking on the RSS icon or tapping and holding to copy the RSS feed and pasting that into a podcast app. If they do that, then every time that they load that feed, I think PrettyLink would be tracking it. I'm using PrettyLinks for all of these. So unless, I think so.
I'm just, because to me, when I see somebody has a podcast, I open up Overcast and I search for it.
Right.
The only podcast I heard last week, I was in Houston, and somebody said, have you listened to the Gimlet Academy? And I searched for it. I'm like, I can't find it. And they said, it's only in Spotify. And I was like, oh, now I'm going to have to listen to a podcast in Spotify. I'm like, all right, but they said it was really good. It's on my list. I'll get to that right after I update my plugins on my subscribe page. But that's the first time I've run into a podcast that was like, oh, you can't get that. And I'm like, well,
yes, it's Spotify. Dear Spotify, this is the person of the show. Can we play some music? Thanks. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Dear Spotify, when I click a podcast in your beloved app and it takes me to the web, let me play it. Do not make me sign in. Isn't the whole goal? I mean,
right.
I get it. Like, but I'm out. Like, let me sample what's on your service, even if it is just a sample. Maybe you don't play the whole thing, and maybe then, but don't cut me out, man. It drives me crazy because I'm not opening the Spotify app. It's not happening. You're asking too much. 2 clicks and it's over, my friends. I'm just saying that would be nice. It's free advice. I mean, you could hire the Roundtable. We'll bring all 2,000 of us, and you'll have the best focus group of your entire life. We're going to do that, you guys. It's our new premium service. But the problem is all subscribers have to show up.
That's the result of the Spotify acquisition of Gimlet. I mean, they want to have some exclusive content. 2 really quick things. The RSS thing is blowing my mind because I don't know about you guys. When I have dinner with a group of friends and, you know, being the podcaster, you have to market your podcast. No one knows an RSS feed. There are people still at my table who don't know how to listen to a podcast on their smartphone. Is there any possibility that when Google or other search engines are, when
Crawling.
they're crawling your website, that it would be specifically searching for RSS and registering?
Google does, but it's looking in a different place. It's not looking for a clickable link. It's looking for a link in the head of the site. And head is not the header, like where your nav bar and your icons and logo are. Head is an HTML portion of your site that carries a bunch of code in it that you don't see as a human, but the machines can see. That's what Google is looking for. So even if you put the RSS link on your site, that's not what Google Podcasts is using.
So it was last year at NAB in New York at the NAB conference. That's when Rob told me that I should add Spotify to my website. He also told me that I should include the RSS feed because there will be a small number of nerdy, old school podcast listeners. And if you don't have it, they're going to email you and ask for it. So I did put it there.
And apparently it's not a small number. It's a big number.
That's what's blowing my mind.
At least for we are catering to a nerd crowd. Like I say nerd.
Yeah.
By the virtue of us all having podcasts, congrats, we're nerds. Like it just the audience we're speaking to is different, right? Like but Andy, you see it for a more general audience who don't have podcasts. But so the numbers from James, from Daniel's site, that's going to be tough, right? We need numbers that go across more websites. And I don't know if I wonder if Todd has any of that kind of data because of Subscribe on Android.
Well, he would have visits on Subscribe on Android, right, potentially. But even like James and I are tracking completely different methods. I'm using PrettyLink Pro or Pretty Links and tracking the clicks, so it doesn't register unless you click through. Now a bot, that would register because as soon as it hits that redirect, and it's a 301 permanent redirect. So my whole theory about the feeds possibly being subscribed and corrupting my data, ignore that because that was incorrect. James, however, is using Google Analytics with their event tracking, which is JavaScript based, which I think a bot would not trigger. I could be wrong on that, depending on how the bot
his audience
is
is still like whether we said it here or in the chat it's podcasters, right? It is people who know what an RSS feed is first thing, right? They, like Andy's saying, like a whole group that visits Pod News knows what that is.
Yeah. And if you use my plugin, there's going to be a 1.5 release soon that will support Google event tracking. So if you've got a highly popular website and you want to help contribute to some research, please get in touch with me. But the main takeaway, I think, is...
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Good job, Daniel. Look at that. Co-host pro.
Even though the RSS feed is geeky, I think the data still shows... I mean, that it's so popular still shows that we should still be using the RSS link on our sites, which surprised me.
Yeah. The only one issue is that Dave said, I do. That is, people are going to click and be like, you just broke, or I got malware.
Yeah. I want to find a random millennial and go, do you know what an RSS feed is? Because there's a big part of me that just goes, no.
Which is why they're on Spotify.
Right. That's a good point. It's
and it could be the RSS icon too. Maybe people on the web are just familiar with that's the button I press to subscribe.
Subscribe to stuff, yeah.
Not
it's true.
And like expecting that to do something more than just show an RSS feed. So there could be some user error or perception here.
We clearly need this is ripe for iteration. Like when I press that button, it needs to do more, right? I mean, at least if it went to Cast Feed Validator. I don't know if that's the name of it anymore, but shout out Glenn, and Blueberry has that now. But at least it would display a viewable. It would look like a page of archives.
So like FeedBurner used to do, or FeedBurner can still do that.
It does. Yeah,
Podcast Mirror does that too.
If you open it up in like Firefox or something, it says. Right. We'll ask you what you want to open it up in. If you open it up in Chrome, it'll show you. If you open it in Safari, it's all different. We need the button to be able to somehow send us to it. I mean, I would like to be able to install, like put a button or a link that forces people to go look at the RSS feed on Cast Feed Validator. I could probably do that, right?
Well, just use Podcast Mirror from Blueberry. It does present a stylized
There you
view of the feed.
Yeah,
you
there's
go.
a plugin for Firefox and Chrome that'll let you see the feed.
Or are you saying see it for the podcaster? To
For the
be able
person who clicks it, anyone on your website.
Oh, okay.
When Andy's dad shows up and he clicks RSS feed because he recognizes the icon because
Yeah.
back in the day he had a feed reader, right? He should be presented with a web page. Ideally, it would even look like my website. Let's get crazy. Like it should look like my website, and it should almost look like an archive page. I mean, just so that you're not confused, that you don't see a page of code.
Yeah, I agree with that because the people that come to my site are likely not. Well, they are probably nerds, but nerds in a different
Right.
different category. And yeah, I think even for myself, because I recognize the RSS icon, I understand that it's a technical way to get to content, but I never click on it. And I'd be worried about putting it on my site in case, I mean, having heard that it opens a page of computer code,
Good.
I'd be
Yeah.
concerned that people would think exactly that something's broken.
Let's because we traditionally spend our first half of the show on one topic, which congrats, we've done that. Although
My
I feel like
takeaway
it's
is that this conversation qualified us all for a Podcasters Roundtable podcast nerd T-shirt.
yeah.
Then,
So
When we get some
we'll wear it
swag.
proudly.
That's right.
well, and
Jason, I got a question up here from Jason in the chat. It says, "Is Blueberry's Mirror, what is it called, Daniel?
Podcast Mirror.
Podcast Mirror, a good replacement for FeedBurner?" I would say yes, but if anyone wants to elaborate on that, Daniel.
Depends on what you were using FeedBurner for. Podcast Mirror, it does really only
general
two
advice.
things.
Yes.
Mirrors your feed, so it's cached. You don't have to worry about it loading up your website with bandwidth. And it also does give you a stylized view of your feed in most browsers. So if you do click on the RSS, you see something that looks nice. FeedBurner did a whole lot more. Most of it was unnecessary or breaks podcasting.
This is important before I move on, because I have run into issues in the past using PowerPress and having the feed on my website, only to have that be such a strain on my server that people were like, my host is like, you need to upgrade to like this super pricey one. They said it was coming from the RSS feed. Every time an episode would come out, it would load it, whatever it was. Does it relieve that? Is that what you said?
yeah,
How does it do that? Because how's it doing that?
that's a good question because it's still loading the page.
Like FeedBurner, Podcast Mirror, well, they both do this. They load the feed from your page, then they cache it on their servers. And then when someone loads that feed URL, so it's not your feed URL from your own domain, it's the Podcast Mirror or FeedBurner or whatever service that you're using. It's that URL, and then it's loaded from their servers instead of from your servers. And their servers have cached it, so it loads quickly.
So like I built a website, I built a feed from my own website via PowerPress. That's the URL I'm submitting to, say, any podcast directory. So it's now pulling a cache version from Podcast Mirror instead of right off my website.
No, think of it like FeedBurner, except better.
Yeah.
You run your feed through Podcast Mirror, and then you use the feed that Podcast Mirror
Got
gives
you.
you.
I missed the step. But anyways, there's your answer, Jay.
So
FeedBurner, but better. Do it. Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But to go back to your question, that would eliminate any kind of apps bringing a lot of extra traffic to your site. The question, because Ray, you were saying when you load your website, just loading the website, that
Loading the feed was like hitting the server hard, apparently.
because your feed still exists, it's just being used. So
right, but because subscribers would request the feed.
Oh, well, see, the subscribers now are pulling from Podcast Mirror.
Right. That's okay. Let's get out of here.
So this really applies if you gain traction in your podcast lane.
Yeah.
Yes. Where did that come from? Lane.
Trying to move the conversation along.
Right. Oh, there it is. I'm like, where does that come from? It's in the Google Doc. All right. Yes, we are moving it on. I've done a poor job of getting our guest involved. So it's become some other show completely. It's with Dave, Daniel, and I. Here we go. The nerds, they're enjoying it though. I know that. Like, these are the questions I have, so I would be enjoying it. So this is good stuff. We are halfway through, so we got plenty of time. Our next story, let me actually just me just pick one here that is good. Susie. So I alluded to this in the ramp about conferences. So you have a article here, how to maximize your conference experience, which we're less interested in, right? Than you were more interested in. Well, tell us what the talking points were from that.
Well, I was actually pretty interested in what they had to say about maximizing conference experience, because it's always daunting when you go to a conference, and we have some podcast conferences over in the UK, but yeah, it's conference season, and I guess the jealousy or the envy of knowing that you lot are all going to Podfest and LA Evolutions and
Right.
or Podcast Movement Evolutions. You know, everything just seems to be happening in America, obviously, because it always does.
Most people here, most people listening will not get to go. Right?
No, exactly. And of course, I recognize that, you know, it's a big place and it's not always easy to go. But for those people that do go, I've heard so many stories about the networking that people have done and the opportunities that have come out of it. And it's like, well, I know that sometimes you can join live feeds or watch the lectures afterwards, the talks afterwards. But I'm just wondering, from the people in the room who talk at lectures, at conferences, what kind of tips would you give for those remote viewers or those of us that just can't get to conferences? What things can we do to network, to take advantage of the knowledge that all the podcasters are sharing there? It's like it's a closed club, and like, how do we muscle in on that?
Well, that's rule number one. It's not a closed club. I had somebody at Podcast Evolution. She's like, I've been listening to you for years. I was gonna like come up and say hi at a conference, and I didn't have the nerve. And I was like, wait, what? I'm like the most approachable person on the planet, but she was freaking
really
out about it.
Scary, Dave.
I guess, I don't know. But and for the record, I've been in your shoes. I was at FinCon where Andy was, and everybody's talking about Monte Carlo simulations. I have no idea what they're talking about. And literally, I was in a session for speakers. So it was a dinner for speakers. I could not have been any further away from the speakers because I was like, I have no idea what anybody's talking about. I'm going to feel stupid. And all I said to myself was, okay, see that person right over there? You're going to go walk up to them and say, what brings you to the show? Can you do that? And I'm saying this to myself in my head. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. So I just walked up. I'm like, what brings you to the show? And then off goes the conversation. So don't be afraid to reach out to anybody, because we're all there for, and if they go to something, they're like, oh, I'm here to do a deep dive on Monte Carlo simulations. I'll go like, oh, that's great. That's awesome. I'm here to teach people how to podcast. And he'll go, oh, that's great. Awesome. And then you turn to the next person, because you very soon realize I have nothing in common with you. And you just move to the next person. But that would be the first, you have to be, I mean, podcasting is great because as an introvert, I get to meet millions of people without meeting millions of people. It's awesome. But when you're face to face, it's different. And just come out of your shell and ask somebody, so what brings you to the show?
And for the other side, for the people who can't attend, because that's if you're there, right? Like, it takes a certain amount of guts to even go sometimes. Like, a lot of podcasters are sort of introverts, right? It feels like that. It's easiest talking to Mike. It's less face to face. Even me sometimes, like, it's an overwhelming number of people. So if you do make it to a conference, definitely take advantage. Like, say hi to everyone that you want to say hi to. Say hi, because that's the best part. It's really the only reason I go. I do not go for the knowledge. Why would I go to a podcast? I don't claim to know everything, but in general, I don't even go into the sessions, because guess who I just saw in the hall? Daniel. Oh, and then Dave walked by, and then the people I already talk to all the time, but it's different in person, right? But if you're not there, and I don't go to a lot of conferences at all, definitely get in. Like, there's going to be a hashtag to follow, right? And the people from the conference are using the hashtag. The people watching the conference use the hashtag. Like, Twitter for me is that networking that I have when I can't be at the conference, even while the conference is going on. And the conference might retweet you and stuff. Anyway, that's a great way. But Andy, I'll ask you, like, I'm sure there's conferences you wanted to go to, you didn't. Have you networked with people offline? I say offline, but not in person. I don't know. What advice do you have for someone who's not attending a conference that you wish you could, but to actually sort of be part of it?
Well, the article talked about making a point to take advantage while you're there. Oh my gosh, he needs some chopsticks to catch that fly.
I'm not that good. I got it.
Karate Kid.
No, it's mosquito season.
So the article talked about you should take advantage of being there and go talk to the speaker afterwards, right? And pay them a compliment. A compliment goes a long way. So I think that the same thing applies to if you're not there in person. If you reach out to the speaker afterwards and you send them a tweet or an email, and you just reach out and say that I really enjoyed your talk at this conference, and whether you have a follow-up question or you just want to tell them, I think that goes a long way, right?
A huge way.
Speakers like to hear feedback.
I did 30 minutes at Podcast Movement Evolutions. I did 90 minutes in the hallway. And that was, I was having the time of my life, because as a person who likes to help people podcast, when I can help them podcast, it's like, it sounds weird, but it's almost selfish, because the whole time when I see somebody go, oh, and I see them get over the hurdle, that to me puts a huge amount of gas in my tank. And so when I could just see the next person like that was stuck and you get them unstuck, you're like, this is the best ever. Who's next? Who can I get unstuck? And that was just a blast.
Don't you think in the same way that if in 3 months later, you got an email or you got a tweet and someone messaged you saying, hey, I just watched your session, I really liked it, that would go pretty far. Like that would go a long way, right? You'd be like, oh, cool.
Yeah, who doesn't want to hear I liked your thing, whatever it is, And the other thing I was going to say is, I don't know why it is. It's almost like a tribal thing. People end up standing in circles, and all you have to do is just stand like one more step closer to everybody. And the circle, he said, hitting his microphone.
He got too close.
Yeah, I got too close to the microphone. The circle will open up, and somebody will just kind of like, because it's like, it's rude not to say, hey, how's it going? And you go, oh, okay, cool. And then you're in. I did that at Podcast Evolutions. There was a Wondery party, and I just looked up and like, my peeps were here. Ray and Daniel were here. I was like, all right, I got to meet some new people. And the same thing, I had to pull myself over there to like, all right, go meet some new people. And I just stood real close to their circle. And finally, one guy looked and saw me there. It's like, hey, well, how's it going? And they open up the circle, and you kind of just join the conversation. It feels a little awkward because you're just kind of like trolling up on a bunch of people and just standing there, but they will open up. It's like there's nobody there. It's like, who's that? Ew, it's not Mean Girls. So we're all there to help each other.
I have to say that is exactly true. I mean, I recently went to Pods Up North, which is a conference that it was the first time it was on here, up in Manchester. And we had an amazing number of speakers, wonderful attendees. And it was the case. You can just go and talk to anyone. And people are really friendly. That's the one thing that I really value about meeting other podcasters, is that it doesn't matter what show you have. Generally, I think the vast majority are supportive, want to help each other and want to connect. So I also host meetups for podcasters once a month in London. So I'm really big into podcasters meeting each other and just hearing about all the different shows, the different methods we have for creating our shows. So I find that really, really useful as well.
Do you have a website for that meetup?
I don't. It's not actually mine. It's I don't know if you know the Podcasters Support Group, Helen Zaltzman's group. Facebook, Facebook group. Yeah,
that's how you'd find it.
Yeah, absolutely. And once a month I just host a London meetup.
Was that at the conference center in Manchester?
The Pods Up North.
Yeah. It's like a newer, like circular. Anyways, it's really nice.
No, it wasn't there. No, it wasn't there.
One of the few places I've been. I wish I'd known you then, because then I would have come to the meetup group and stuff. Anyways, all right, but yeah, it's like again, for me, a conference, the number one reason I'm probably almost any conference is meeting people, and it is challenging to even get to sessions. It's challenging. Dave makes a good point. Like, go outside your friends. Like, I will spend all my time talking to all the people I talk online, because when you see them in person, it is just different. But as much as you can, pull yourself away from that. Meet new people.
The last night of Podcast Movement, they made a Podcast Movement sponsored their own party. It was perfect. They had one guy in the corner playing music. They had lights.
Was he on the ones and twos, Dave? Just curious.
No ones and twos. And then they had lights because iHeart threw a party in the dark. That was not very helpful. And then they had heaters because it was kind of cold for California. And I ended up spending the whole night talking with Tim Street, Evo Terra, and Dan Class. It was all like all these old OG guys that I hadn't seen, but we're never in the room at the same time. So the whole time I was like, I should probably go like talk to the guy from Pandora or whatever. And I did, but for the longest time I was just hanging out with people I knew. So I took that time to deepen the relationship I already had. So it's kind of depending on I'm just going to sit here for the rest of the show. If we need a beat. Yeah, exactly. Give me a beat. So I did that. And I kind of knew that I should have probably met more people. And I finally did talk to the Pandora guy and say, why did you give SoundCloud $75 million? And that's a whole another story. But
and even that, like companies like are represented by people at those things. I mean, Dave and Daniel, I probably wouldn't have met Blog Talk Radio back in 2016 if Andy didn't grab us and what I thought was going to be a beatdown, but was not. We were all very scared at the moment, but it was great. And things, things progressed a little bit as those conversations happened. But yeah, even companies like reach out. I mean, like Apple's there if you know how to find them.
I talked to Apple. I talked to Apple at Podcast Evolutions. I'm like, why are you letting Anchor submit shows on under your thing? And I didn't really like their answer. So
I didn't like their answer. Oh, all right. Hey, let's move to another one.
I've got 3 tips.
Okay, go ahead. I'll look for an article you give tips.
Consuming the content. One is you got to make sure you actually get around to consuming it. And these following 2 tips then will help you consume it better. If the content is available only in video format, look at your browser's extension library, whether you're on Chrome, Firefox, Edge, whatever it is. There's probably some kind of video speed controller extension that lets you play videos at faster speed.
Are you talking about like the digital virtual ticket thing if you come to a conference? Okay.
Yeah, if the player doesn't already have a speed control in it, like YouTube and Vimeo now have speed controls in it. So that's something you could take advantage of to be able to listen to it faster, consume the content more easily. The other thing is if you can download the sessions, look at your favorite podcasting app's ability to potentially upload audio directly to the app. Like on Overcast, that's a premium feature. Some of the other podcast apps also have that ability where you can upload an MP3 file into your podcast app. So then you can easily listen to that session wherever you would listen to podcasts. Yeah. Those are my 3 tips.
Cool. Andy, I'm going to let you pick one of your 2 to lead us through here.
Okay, let me see what my 2 were.
We got the podcasting's biggest mistake and then the episode notes.
Yeah, I'm going to go with podcasting's biggest mistake.
All right, way to steer us away from the more nerdy stuff, which I like, because I thought you would hedge and go with the nerd stuff. But that's good. We've covered that.
Well, I'm curious about this one because in the last couple of weeks, since podcast movement's evolutions, there was kind of a stir in the podcast world, and notably, Dave had posted something like "This is BS," and
Dave, wait.
And I think that after some time had passed, that people's opinions may have changed. So that's why I was curious to see
what is the issue.
What
you're
are
speaking
people's
of?
reaction?
What's the reaction to what?
This was the reaction to the announcement of and I'm going to get the names all wrong.
Sure.
The Academy of Podcasting having a new award show and failing to mention or acknowledge sort of the past.
It's all what it's taken.
Yep.
It's probably not true. We are nerds. We would have found something wrong with it, but it would have helped. It would have helped.
So I thought the gist of the article is that, okay, podcasting as an industry is evolving, and within that, we're seeing sort of 2 sides forming, which is big podcasting tends to be corporate and big networks. They're more focused on advertising and monetization versus the original independent podcasters who typically are not making money. And is there can we all get along?
Yeah. And so I will say before Dave gets to unleash that the divide has always existed, right? Back in the day, Dave will tell you, and I used to go to podcast meetups where if you brought up the idea of making money, you were on the other side of the room from the people who were not there to make money. Making money, that was a bad thing to say at a podcast meetup in 2007. All right.
So have the 2 sides made up or not?
Can I just step in
Yes,
before Dave
please.
answers? Because this was something that got me very upset.
Nice.
Not because of the golden mics and not because of the idea of money coming into podcasting, but because it highlighted yet another divide that I hadn't really been aware of. And that was the split or the description of indie podcasters as that there are two types of indie podcaster. There's the indie podcaster that actually is a professional podcaster. They may be freelance, but they are working and trying to make a living from podcasting. And then there's the hobbyist or the amateur podcaster. And I saw some descriptions of those podcasters as being, kind of like, you're the little guys in the basement with your mic who don't put any planning into your show or anything like that. And that was a bit of a shock to me to see that kind of description. And whereas I thought I was an indie podcaster working towards a common goal of improving my show and making sure my production values were really high and doing what I could, even though I don't earn anything on my show, it kind of made me feel even more separated from the Podcast Academy. Was it the new organization? Because I recognize that is for, while they talk about independent podcasters, I think what they mean, and possibly what other commentators have meant, is the independent podcaster that is that their job is podcasting or that their life is podcasting and it's not a hobby. And I think that really negated all those hobby podcasters out there or amateur podcasters out there who absolutely put a massive amount of thought and preparation and skill into their show. And I thought we were all together. And so that, I just wanted to say that about that additional kind of separation that I was surprised had started to be described.
But here's the thing that can kind of help connect those, I think, maybe, is even if you are an indie podcaster doing all the work yourself, you have no team, you're not even paying a contractor to write show notes or edit your episodes for you. You do it all, literally all for your podcast. You are then the podcast producer. So you can participate as a podcast producer, or you're the marketer. You can participate as a podcast marketer. I think that, from a corporate podcaster's perspective, they see boxes where, okay, a podcaster fits, or a podcast interested person fits into this box. They are the producer, and these are the writers. These are the marketers, and not one person hugs all of these boxes together like most of us indies do. I think, though, it's still too early to really know how big they're going to make that divide.
It's a divide, though. I mean, like,
yeah,
I don't even know if it's a divide so much as that we do different goals. We're different. Everything's different, right? We don't have $100,000 to produce a narrative storytelling podcast, and we also don't have $100,000 on the line. Like, we don't need to get it back, right? So it's free for us. Free, quotes, air quotes. There are some costs, but we can make a podcast and no one can cancel us. There are corporate podcasts where, like, it's a TV show, man. If you don't get a certain amount of listeners, you're gone. And you might be out of work for the host, the producer, the editor. So they're just different. I think they're just different. And so, Andy, I mean, like, you asking, like, can we just all get along? Where do you think that doesn't happen? Where do you think it needs to happen? Or what do you hope happens? Or where do you think we clash? Is it just that we kind of frame it as us versus them? And then who does that hurt? Does it hurt the listener? Does it hurt us? Lots of questions.
I think it's a little bit of a mindset from the indie podcasters. It's like, how are you viewing it? Are you viewing it as a positive or a negative? I think if you're purely taking a very optimistic view, you say that everybody is trying to promote podcasts to the listeners, and indie podcasters should therefore benefit. And if money's coming into podcasting, even though the indies get a much smaller piece of that pie, if money's coming into podcasting in general, there should be opportunities for indie podcasters to monetize and have opportunities that they didn't have previously. And before we pass it on to Dave, I like that Tom Webster, he's very thoughtful in his writing usually.
Yeah, he's good.
Right. And the title of his article, Podcasting's Big Mistake, he's concluding that the big mistake is that indie podcasters have not organized and united. And I kind of question that because, as you were alluding to, Ray, there are so many shows, people have so many diverse topics and different objectives. Do indie podcasters even want to unite? Like, is there a need for it or not?
Personally, I think if we did have, I mean, I think Rob Greenlee has proposed this and wants to do this and is maybe even trying to do this a little bit. It would be great to have some leverage as an indie podcaster, as a group of, and it gets so tricky, right? Like, who qualifies? What does that mean? I mean, it's so tricky, but to have one voice to go to Spotify with, to say, okay, as a group, we're going to pull our podcast out of Spotify because we don't agree with just a little power, like a union, right?
Just, yes, voicing any voice, any opinion.
Right, because we can all individually shout about these things, and we do. And to be honest with you, I think from the other side, a little bit of common courtesy, a little bit of respect for the history, and a mention here and there goes so far with this community. It's when people see that new big money comes in and just wants to kind of erase the past or claim the past, meaning they want to be the first. They're rewriting the history. And so I feel like the old guard, when you hear that term, Todd, all those people, they do a great job of protecting the history. It's important. People see this as like just being get off my lawn type, and it really is about the history of the space. That is not going to stay alive unless people do fight for it. So I think it's important.
So I totally, sorry, Dave, I'll let you speak in a moment. I totally agree with you there, Ray. I've met quite a few now of the original podcasters and the people that are protecting the history. And I think it's important that story gets told. But I think looking to the future, the other important thing, and actually something you mentioned just now, what do the listeners see? Really, yes, it is the podcasters that are concerned about this. The listeners won't care. They might hear about an award show or whatever. I think another of my really big concerns, though, is that with the emphasis on big award shows and what kind of shows, whether independent shows are in there or not, it's going to focus attention much more again on like the closed group. Sorry, I keep going on about closed group. I personally feel very much part of the podcasting community, and I feel that everything that happens to raise awareness, we've got a massive, great audience out there that don't yet know about podcasts. So there is a massive opportunity for growth. But if they don't understand the difference between the small, independent, well-made podcasts and the big serial type shows, and you get these top 10 lists, things like that, they will always go to the thing that is promoted. They may never find out these really high quality shows because they never hear about them. And so I feel the Academy is yet another way that it closes it off to those of us that make shows that don't get the big awareness campaigns. I feel like I'm sounding very bitter. I actually love podcasting. I love the world of podcasting, and I love the whole aspect of it, the whole thought of what we're doing out here, all in our own ways. But things like this make me worried about how we can continue.
Stephanie brings up, I like what she says here. She says, focus on content, topic, community, and your niche podcast family. All else does not matter. And, when it comes to a lot of times, there are some of us, I think Dave, Daniel, and I, Todd, any of those people need to shout about protecting certain things like RSS, open access, and podcast history and stuff. For most people, yeah, and when it comes to big money, and Andy, you talked about big money's coming in, indies are seeing very little, going to see little of that pie. I don't want the ads that they're saying we hope we get, like a Pepsi sponsorship. Like, it's just, that's not the ad I'm looking for. It's not worth putting on your podcast because you're small, your small audience, your niche community, is not going to work. So, for the most part, most podcasters focusing on their audience is the only thing that matters. Like it's all that matters. But you know, I'm glad when people speak up and they say something if they see something that they think is wrong. And then, you know, I think even some of that, all of that stir up that you saw just today, someone from the Daniel, you put it in the chat, was a Podcast Academy. What is it?
Yeah, it's called the Podcast Academy.
It was on the new media show. I think someone said they had a conversation, and I think someone put it in the chat that was a good conversation. And you know, I think that most of the indies, most people who represent indies, they're open to the conversation. And it's being had, fortunately, on the microphone in this case. So definitely check that out. I haven't got to listen to it yet. So I think for the most part, we get along. I think there's going to be bumps and bruises along the way, but
Dave's been trying to talk all this time.
Dave
No,
doesn't-
the listeners
the
can't
joke
tell
that-
it's because he broke his microphone.
Yeah,
from
no,
pitching
the
it so
joke
many
is Dave
times.
doesn't actually have something to add, but we all think he does.
Well, no, it's kind of like this.
Okay, good.
So let's say they go, all right, today we're going to announce an award show for rock and roll, going all the way back to the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin. If you're Chuck Berry, if you're Little Richard, if you're Elvis, you're like, hey, what? That's all I'm saying. It's like, no, hold on a second. And I did learn a valuable lesson from this. Before you completely just, out on people, check two sources. Because the thing that set me off was a tweet where somebody tweeted, what's the guy's name? Starts with an H. Mr. Hernan.
Yeah.
Somebody directly tweeted him and said, hey, what about the previous thing and the Podcasters Hall of Fame? And he said, we contacted them and they shut it down. And I took that to believe they shut down the Hall of Fame. I should have gone to Dan Franks or Jared Easley and said, hey, can we get confirmation on this? But instead I was like, wait, what? Huh? And I was off to the races. So the thing, so I'm not against it. The word I'm really good. So my wait and see is, and I've heard this word a lot, professional. And we're going to, blah, 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 and professional podcasters. I'm like, okay, well, Jim Harold is a one-man band. The guy makes a living podcasting. Darren Dake started off because he wanted to talk to other corners, is making a really nice living. He's got a team now, but he's not on a big network. Natalie Ekdahl does Biz Chicks. She's not on a network, but these people are making a living with their podcasting. Granted, there's always going to be that 10% that do and 90% that don't, but I'll just be interested to see what they classify as a quote professional podcaster to get into their thing. Cause I'm going to give them my $100. I like to play with everybody. To me, and I caught the guy in the hallway and I said, hey, you just said this award show didn't exist until now. And I go, I've got one on my next to my bed. It's 2017 top technology podcast. Can you see where that might be just a little and he goes, no. This was a professional award show, nonprofit, voted on by your peers. And God bless Rob Greenlee. He was right behind me. He goes, yeah, podcastawards.com. It's been around since 2005. and to his credit, he said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend anybody. He goes, he goes, we're here to grow the thing. And I was like, well, I appreciate the apology. I'm like, just so you know, I just wanted to go, have you ever heard of Google? But I didn't. So it was, it's interesting. The thing I keep hearing, and again, so I'm waiting to see what a professional podcaster is. What's that definition?
How they define it.
Yeah. And then the other thing I'm really interested to see is they say they're doing this to increase awareness. And I'll give, if you think about it, iHeartRadio, if I don't listen to the radio, but if I listen to an iHeart station, sometime before I go, I don't need to hear Eddie Money again, they will advertise the iHeartRadio app. Right. And when the awards were going on, they promoted all that. But my thing to this is, I know what the Tony Awards are. It's for Broadway. It has not inspired me to go to New York and watch a Broadway show. So,
but what's that Korean movie? Outbreak? Pandemic?
Yeah.
Parasite.
Yeah.
Parasite.
Don't you want to watch Parasite now?
Yes.
I heard until there were subtitles, and that's when I went, okay, I'll put that on the list right after I fix Daniel's.
Dave's uncultured, so yeah, but yes.
Yeah, that's it. No, I probably would. I mean, I watched
You can have
I-
Google
I-
Translate for you.
Yeah, I've
This
watched a
is
couple that
compelling
were not.
story about a man and a woman.
Yeah, I'm not the ultimate middle-aged white guy. I will venture out of my lane every now and then. So
Well, a subtitled show movie is not instantly going to turn people away. I mean, like The Passion of the Christ, for example,
right.
mostly made by Americans, but it was subtitled all in Latin because of Mel Gibson's choice.
But your point is that it gave exposure to a movie that most of us wouldn't
Right.
have seen, right? Or
Right.
even wanted to see.
Yeah, and something that we might not have ever have heard of,
Right.
if not for all of the attention that
You
it got.
think that these awards, if you win, it's just going to give an exposure to certain, but that's certain podcasts. It's not all podcasts. Like it's not going to bring attention. I mean, in theory, you could say, "Oh, I heard about Serial on Twitter. Don't know what the heck a podcast is, but there's this thing called Serial, and I listened. Now I listen to all kinds of podcasts. Although, didn't we find out that didn't really happen?
Mhm.
Like Serial was good for Serial.
And true crime in general. Yeah.
True crime actually did launch a whole genre.
That
We
kind of
have
did
an
happen for me.
opportunity here,
No, I
though.
can't say that. That's bad. Shouldn't say that.
Yeah, they didn't launch it.
They didn't launch true crime. I know that.
We have an opportunity here, and that is, since the Podcast Academy, I mean, there are two different things almost here. There's the Podcast Academy for everything that it does, and the Golden Mike Awards, or whatever they're going to end up calling it. They may rename it.
They
But,
should.
Yeah, they probably will, I would guess. But there's the awards, which, as Hernan even said in his keynote from Podcast Movement Evolutions, that's like one day. The Podcast Academy is covering all of the other 364 days of the year. So what we as independent podcasters, whether you consider yourself a professional or an amateur at your craft, whether that's a hobby or business, we have an opportunity to join this and to influence it, because they said that like the stuff that will be voted on by the members. The podcasts that win the awards will be voted on by the members. Like, yes, there's Todd Cochran's The People's Choice Podcast Awards. That's voted on by anybody, not even your audience. I mean, honestly, I won the award in 2013, 2014, whatever year it was, 2012. Not because of my own audience, but because of a lot of people who don't listen to my podcast, but are fans of my podcast network. So I won it not from my own audience. Whereas this awards thing is voted on by members. And to be a member, you have to be a podcaster and have 2 references in the space. And however they define this professional thing and stuff like that. But I think our opportunity is to vote with our dollars here, or pounds, or whatever your currency is. Join this and vote. Vote every single time. And I'm not getting on a political rant here either. But
vote.
Yeah.
It's right.
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah. So get involved.
You live.
Vote every chance you get, so that wouldn't it be cool if they've got the 100 professional big corporate podcasters as members, and then they've got 50,000 indie podcasters all voting for stuff differently from the corporate podcasters. We have that kind of power with that. I'm a fan, if you can't tell.
I think any awards show, even the very established ones, they're highly controversial. So I think 2 things. One is that as an indie podcaster, my assumption is that these podcast awards, we're going to see the same corporate podcasts being named the winners and not the indie podcasters. Whether that's a good assumption or not, I don't know. But then you think about the Grammys. Do you guys remember when Steely Dan won the first heavy metal?
Yeah, because they beat
Grammy?
Metallica, and
That was insane.
Crime.
Yeah.
no shade, Steely Dan. Just,
Technically, it was
They
Jethro
have a
Tull, but
flute. I mean,
same
Toll,
point.
that's right. Toll.
Yeah. I remember that.
so
Because when I think heavy metal, I think flute.
exactly.
But no, I'm with Daniel. I'm trying to get my head out of being so cynical, because this could be a good thing, and I'm going to jump in and I'm going to vote, because I don't get to complain about it if I'm not part of it, if I'm not voicing my opinion.
But it's an
So
award show. Like, that's not even that's not even like, who cares that much? Like, it's
Right.
one thing, one time. So what? Like,
but
you
also
either
it's
pay
not
attention-
just the awards, is it? It's going to
Yeah, it's
be.
not just
So I think absolutely what Dave's saying. It's more than the awards. it's things that they're going to be looking into, but I just would like to know that it's possible for an indie amateur hobbyist podcaster to be involved.
And it takes two people to be offended, because I know when he said there's been a lack of training, I was like, dude, you're at an event where we're training people how to podcast. But I went back and thought about that. Nobody's really training how to do NPR styled, their kind of podcast. And I went, okay, I'll give him that. But then I thought, what about Transom? Transom is a great website with a bunch of stuff. So that was when I was just kind of like, but I'm trying not to. Try not to be that guy.
Due diligence on both sides would have went far.
Yeah.
Like if people had checked their
Yeah.
sources.
Well, I think the kind of training he's referring to, everything that he's doing, they are approaching as like taking a Hollywood approach to podcasts. So look at what's in the Hollywood industry. There is
The
formalized
academy actually
training.
is training. Like,
Yeah, there is the academy. And of course, there are degrees you can get that are relevant to Hollywood level production. Maybe the academy, the podcast academy, is going to get to that point where they can start influencing college curriculum. So maybe there's going to be a Bachelor of Arts in podcasting someday, thanks to what can come from this. So I think that's the direction. They're looking at high level standardized training, not to say, oh, hey, we're at a podcast conference training you about podcasting. And guess what? There's no training about podcasting. I don't think that's what he was thinking.
No. I don't think, I don't know. I know, because I asked him, Rob asked him, he goes, why didn't you get anybody like from the industry? And he said, well, they had to hide it. And Rob said, why? And he never really did answer that, because they wanted to make a big announcement. And I was like, I don't know if that's a great answer for
old media style. Let's make a splash.
So
you gotta have that. We gotta have that podcast. Everyone wants to have the open. Like, what's it called?
But yeah,
your launch, Dave.
Yeah, what I've always been saying, it would be great to see a commercial about podcasting, like how to subscribe to a podcast on TV. And that's always been like, yeah, good luck with that. And not that this would do it, but these people do have money. They have a heck of a lot more money than some of us do. And if they can use it for good. So it's just a matter of, what is their definition of good? What is their definition of professional? We'll see what happens. And if, in the same way, if it's really horrible, I don't know a lot of people that got upset when they weren't nominated for an iHeart Award, because we all knew they were somewhat of a joke.
They were the first podcast awards, if you remember.
Right. Well, and I think that was the other thing that kind of happened here is going all the way back to Steve Jobs and Amateur Hour. And I remember once I heard somebody on a show and they said that there haven't been any women pioneers. And I'm like, hello, Mignon Fogarty, Myrna Lafferty, Elsie Escobar, hello. And when Pandora got into it and they hired somebody, and I wish I could remember what these podcasts were, and I wish I would have kept these recordings. They said there weren't any, like they were looking for people with experience. And there weren't any. And I'm like nobody's been podcasting forever. It's like, so I'm like, there's the Chris Christiansens, there's the CC Chapmans, there's all sorts of people out there, but apparently it didn't come up on the first page of Google. So I was just like, so when yet another person stood up and kind of erased, history, we all just kind of went, okay, really? I guess we need to let's plant a flag here and go, can somebody please acknowledge that Mark Maron did not invent podcasting? So
yeah, again, due diligence, do a little research. It's language, right? I mean, and language can be tough sometimes. People don't always say the right thing, and I think there's definitely a path. I'm not concerned. I think that the push and pull keeps people honest, so I think everything will be all right. But
yeah.
By the way, Eric Hunley has sent a correction for me. It was Jethro Tull who won the best heavy metal.
Right.
Steely Dan was like a separate controversial win. I think that was album of the year one year.
Well,
very
Steely,
talented band, but
we just won't go there. We can go to the origin name of that, but we won't.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, I think that's it. We obviously could keep going, but that just means a chance to bring Andy and Susie back. And but as we head out, obviously, if there's something you wanted to say and we didn't get there, say it. But then let us know where we can get your podcast, and because we have hidden interests in our audience who knew Evo was a birder? And and you never know. So there's definitely an audience here that wants to consume your stuff, whether it's financial advice or birding. So Susie, thanks for joining us for your first roundtable, and thanks for like staying up basically all night. It's the middle of the night. It's in the UK. We're keeping the international vibe going, but seriously, thank you for sacrificing sleep.
Not at all. And thank you to Stephanie for in the chat as well, who's an hour ahead of me, so she's up even later.
Yes.
But no, I've watched this show so much and listened to you for such a long time that I'm just thrilled to have had a chance to come on. I hope I get the chance to do that again. Thank you so much for letting me on. If anyone wants to listen to a podcast about birding, I am the Casual Birder, so it's the Casual Birder podcast. You don't have to know about birds. You just have to, I guess, enjoy nature to listen to the show. And if there's anyone out there who would like to be on the show, I'd like to contribute anything about the birds they see, I'm more than happy to hear it. All of my contact details are on the website, casualbirder.com.
I love the name Casual Birder. Just rocks. Like it's like, how was that not taken? And it tells me so much, right? Like it tells me that I just want to check this out. And you got a little board back there behind you with the Casual Birder on it. Very good branding. I love it.
I had that from being part of the sunflower. Heather Welsh's thing. What I will say is Birder was a really bad choice for a name because I can't get on Alexa, or rather, I'm probably on there somewhere, but she can't recognize Birder. She only hears burger. So.
Burger. I was thinking maybe she heard murder. The casual murder.
If only I'd thought of that. The casual murder.
The great podcast name right there.
Huge podcast. You want to be you want to go from indie to professional.
Yeah, that's the way I should have gone.
Yep. Instant money.
Casualmurder.com. Let's see if that's available.
I already took it, Dave. I'm faster than you. I know what to look out for. All right. Well, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you again. Maybe we can shift. Maybe we can be in the middle of the night and you could be morning for you. That would probably be better. Andy, also first roundtable, even though you've been on this for so long. Thanks for being so patient, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Yes, a longtime listener, first time visitor. People can find my podcast Inspired Money at inspiredmoney.fm, where I talk to all kinds of guests about positive money stories. And I have not yet talked about Monte Carlo simulations, but maybe I should.
Nice. Definitely, Dave, given topic ideas. Also a name I like, Inspired Money. These, it's like you start a podcast and you think all the names are taken. But they're out there. I mean, you guys have been podcasting for a while, but especially, in a competitive niche like finance and money, Inspired Money, that, I don't know how long have you had the domain? You have the domain. You do. InspiredMoney.com.
2.5 years.
Oh, not that long. And it wasn't
that long.
Nice job.
It feels like a long time though.
It feels, yes. It'll make you, it's like being president. This job will make you old real fast.
We're aging quickly.
Yeah. All right. Co-host Dave Jackson, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to be back. And you can find me schoolofpodcasting.com if you want to start a podcast and grow your influence. Schoolofpodcasting.com.
Very cool. Co-host Daniel J. Lewis, thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you. I don't have new episodes out yet. So the thing I've been working on that I want you to check out is mypodcastreviews.com with major updates in March. mypodcastreviews.com.
Very cool. All right. Well, podcastersroundtable.com. You can jump off from there to check out the YouTube videos. You can subscribe. If there's a button missing that you need, let me know. I need to update those for sure. I'll go to Daniel's site. I'll get some buttons. It'll look great. And I wonder if I get those for free. I'll have to ask. I'll have to ask Daniel privately. All right. Podcastersroundtable.com/guest. Sign up. Become a roundtabler someday if you're as patient as Andy. And we'll see you soon. Wave goodbye. We're out. See you.
Thank you.